Somebody on ESPN Cleveland just said the quietest, most confident wrong thing I have heard all training camp, and I need every single one of you to hear this before we go any further. A host on air looked into a camera and told his audience that the real quarterback competition happening right now in Berea is not between Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. It is between Sanders and Dylan Gabriel for the backup job. Let that sink in for a second. This organization burned an entire off-season program, mandatory minicamp, OTAs, and now weeks of training camp splitting first-team reps between Sanders and Watson. And somebody wants you to believe that was all about figuring out who holds the clipboard. If that sounds insane to you, drop a football emoji in the comments right now, because I need to know I am not losing my mind. What is actually happening inside that building in Cleveland is far more interesting, far more complicated, and far more telling than any single media take can capture. And today on Gridiron Ground, we are going to rip through every major thing the Browns media said this week, separate the signal from the noise, and show you what this quarterback battle actually looks like when you strip away all the spin. Because the truth sitting underneath all of this coverage is something almost nobody is saying out loud.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Let me walk you through the full logic of this take so you can appreciate just how far off the rails it went. The observation itself was not completely made up. On the days Watson works with the first-team offense, Gabriel does appear to get fewer reps with the second team compared to the days when Sanders is working with the twos instead. That part is a real observable pattern from practice. Fine, but the conclusion drawn from that observation is where everything falls apart completely. Because from that single data point, the host suggested that what we are actually watching unfold in Cleveland is not a starting quarterback competition at all. It is a fight between Sanders and Gabriel to determine which one of them gets to be Watson's backup. And I need you to really sit with the implications of that for a moment. Think about everything this franchise has done over the past several months. They drafted Shedeur Sanders. They gave him legitimate first-team reps from the very first day of the offseason program. They continued splitting those reps through OTAs, through mandatory minicamp, and now deep into training camp. Every single report coming out of Berea from reporters with actual field access has described this as a genuine rotation between Sanders and Watson with the ones. Not a tryout for the backup role, a real rotation with the starting offense. And now somebody wants you to believe all of that investment, all of those first-team reps, all of that careful structured development alongside the starters was secretly a backup competition the entire time. That does not survive contact with basic logic. You do not split first-team reps evenly between two quarterbacks for months if one of them is only competing for the right to stand on the sideline holding a headset. That is not how any coaching staff in the history of professional football has ever evaluated a backup. Backup competitions happen with the twos and threes. They happen in the fourth quarter of preseason games that nobody watches. They do not happen in structured first-team periods during training camp, with the offensive coordinator personally rotating the reps. If you are watching this on Gridiron Ground for the first time, this is what we do here. We do not just repeat what somebody said on a radio show and nod along. We take the actual claim, lay it against the actual evidence, and see if it holds up. And this one does not hold up for even 5 seconds. The more interesting question, the one that Take completely dodges, is why this coaching staff has been so deliberate about keeping the rotation as balanced as it has been for this long. Because that level of discipline in managing reps does not happen by accident. It requires intentional planning from Monken and his staff, and that tells you far more about where this competition actually stands than any single day's rep count ever could. But the backup theory was not the only wild thing that came out of Cleveland media this week. Because right after that conversation aired, Watson was officially named the starter for the preseason opener against Chicago. And that announcement set off an entirely new wave of speculation that managed to be almost as disconnected from reality as the backup take itself. Here is the confirmed fact. Deshaun Watson will start the preseason opener on the road against the Chicago Bears. That part is not speculation. That part is not a rumor. The coaching staff confirmed it, and every beat reporter in that building reported the same thing. Where the wheels come off is in what people decided that confirmation actually means. Because immediately after that announcement, the follow-up question in the media room was obvious. Who gets the first team reps the following Thursday heading into the joint practice with Buffalo? And the honest answer, which even the hosts who were speculating about it admitted on air, is that Todd Monken is not going to give anybody a straight answer on that. He might change his mind on the walk out to the practice field. And that is not me being dramatic. That is almost a direct quote from how Monken has described his own decision-making process multiple times this offseason. He has said publicly more than once that he is not going to let reporters stand on the sideline.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
And counting reps like it is some kind of scoreboard that reveals a hidden truth about the depth chart. He said the day-to-day rotation is based on feel, on the specific defensive looks he wants to work against, and sometimes on just changing his mind between the meeting room and the practice field. He told reporters this before OTAs even started. And yet every single day since then, those same reporters walk out to practice, count the reps, and file reports treating the daily split like it is a definitive signal about who is winning the competition. There is a real pattern worth flagging here too, and it goes beyond just Monken being cagey with the media. This is a coach with a documented history from his time at Southern Miss of taking a genuinely long time to make difficult decisions. It was reportedly a point of criticism back then. People around that program felt he was slow to commit even when the evidence seemed clear. Whether you call that being unusually thorough or genuinely hesitant to pull the trigger, that same tendency appears to be showing up here in Cleveland. And it actually lines up with some of the slower-moving decisions this front office has made in other areas too. That is not necessarily a criticism. Sometimes patience leads to better outcomes. But it is worth noting because it directly affects how you should interpret the timeline of this quarterback decision. If the coach making this call has a history of being slower than expected to commit, then reading every daily practice rep count as an urgent signal about who is ahead is exactly the wrong framework. The decision might not come as fast as people want it to. And forcing a narrative onto incomplete information just because the timeline feels too slow is how you end up with takes like the backup competition theory. But the rep counting and the speculation were only getting started. Because the very next day, one of the most prominent voices covering this team dropped a phrase that I think deserves its own deep examination. And once you see the problem with that phrase, you start to see the problem with a lot of how this competition has been covered from the beginning. Mary Kay Cabot said this moment in time shows Watson has a slight edge in the competition. Now I need you to stop and really think about what that phrase actually communicates, especially coming from her specifically, given how she has covered this quarterback situation from the start. A slight edge. What does that mean in practical terms? Does it mean Watson is performing meaningfully better than Sanders in practice? Does it mean the coaching staff has privately indicated a preference? Does it mean Watson is at 52% and Sanders is at 48%? Or does it mean something closer to 50-50, but described in language that sounds like one side is ahead, because a perfectly even competition does not make for a compelling headline? Here is the actual problem with hedge language like slight edge. If a massive edge and a slight edge both get described using the same vague phrasing by the same source over time, the phrase stops carrying any useful information. It becomes impossible for you as a viewer or reader to tell whether she is describing a real meaningful advantage or whether she is dressing up genuine uncertainty in language that sounds more decisive than it actually is. And that matters because it is the difference between reporting and impression management. When you say slight edge, you are technically making a call without actually committing to anything falsifiable. If Watson wins the job, she can point back and say she called it. If Sanders wins the job, she can point back at the word slight and say she acknowledged it was close. That is not analysis. That is insulation against being wrong. And if you are watching Gridiron Ground, you already know we do not operate like that here. We say what we think, we explain why, and if we are wrong later, we own it. That is the difference. Now she did make one point that I actually agree with completely. She said next week with the joint Bills practice and Watson's start against Chicago is genuinely pivotal for this competition. That is a fair and accurate observation. Those are the first real evaluation opportunities in anything resembling live football, and both quarterbacks are going to face real pressure for the first time. No argument from me on that. Where I start pushing back hard is on the leap she made right after that, suggesting that Watson getting the first preseason start means the job is functionally his to lose. And I need to explain why that logic does not hold up even a little bit. You can only start one quarterback in any single preseason game. That is a scheduling reality. Somebody has to go first regardless of how close the actual competition is. If Watson started with the ones from day one of camp, and they are simply continuing that same established order into the preseason schedule, then the sequencing itself tells you absolutely nothing about who is actually ahead. It is the most mundane, obvious explanation sitting right there in plain sight. And treating the order of preseason starts as a definitive signal about competitive standing, when there is an equally simple logistical explanation available, is exactly the kind of pattern matching that ignores the boring truth in favor of the more dramatic narrative.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
She did make one more point later that I want to give credit where it is deserved. She talked about the parts of quarterback evaluation that do not show up clearly on a broadcast. Pre-snap protection calls, identifying defensive fronts, sliding protections to the right side, handling cadence at the line. Those are real meaningful aspects of playing quarterback that a casual viewer, and honestly even a reporter standing on a practice field sideline, is not always going to catch in real time. That is a legitimate and fair point. But here is where it cuts both ways. If we cannot fully evaluate those elements from the outside, then leaning hard into slight edge language based on that same incomplete viewing access is premature by her own logic. You cannot simultaneously argue that the evaluation is too complex to see from the sideline and also claim you have seen enough to declare an edge. Those two positions contradict each other. And that contradiction is going to become even more important when we look at what a national reporter said about how Andrew Berry is actually making this decision. This is where the conversation actually got useful this week, and I want to make sure this part does not get buried under all the noise we have already walked through. A national reporter with legitimate access relayed that Andrew Berry, Cleveland's general manager, said directly that this quarterback decision comes down to two specific factors: playmaking ability and operation inside the huddle. That is it. Two criteria, not arm strength, not draft pedigree, not salary cap implications. Playmaking ability and operation. Now the immediate assumption most people jumped to when they heard that was that operation inside the huddle automatically favors Watson because he is the veteran. He has been in NFL huddles for years. He knows the language. He has called protections at the line thousands of times. Sanders is a rookie who has been in this system for a few months. On the surface, that seems obvious. But I want to push back on that assumption because something happened 2 days before that national report dropped that directly complicates it. This same coaching staff had to cut a practice short, not end it on time, cut it short, specifically because the 2-minute drill situation was going so poorly. False starts were showing up on both units. But Watson's side was reportedly bad enough that Monken pulled the plug on the entire session out of visible frustration. That is not a small detail. That is the offensive coordinator being so frustrated with the operation of the offense under Watson's leadership in a critical situational period that he decided continuing the session was not productive. If operation inside the huddle is genuinely one of the two deciding factors in this competition, and Watson's unit was the one performing poorly enough to get an entire practice cut short, then the assumption that Watson automatically wins the operation category by default just because he has been in the league longer does not hold up cleanly. Experience matters. Nobody is saying it does not, but experience is supposed to translate into execution. And when the execution breaks down badly enough to end a practice early, the experience argument loses some of its automatic weight. Now I'm not going to sit here and pretend one bad practice means Watson cannot operate an offense. That would be just as much of an overreaction as the people pretending one good Sanders practice means he is ready to start week 1. But what I will say is that the operation category is not the slam dunk for Watson that people are treating it as. It is a genuine competition on that specific criterion too. And if Berea is being honest that those are the only two factors, then the playmaking ability side of the equation becomes absolutely critical. Because that is where something interesting has been showing up in the reports from multiple independent sources. And what those sources are saying about the physical tools of these two quarterbacks might not match what a lot of people expected heading into this training camp. That gap in expectations versus reality is exactly what we need to talk about next. Here is something that has now been confirmed by multiple independent reporters covering this team, not just one outlet pushing a narrative but separate sources landing on the same observation independently. Shedeur Sanders currently has the stronger arm of the two quarterbacks in this competition. That is genuinely notable, not because arm strength alone decides who should start. It does not. But because the consistency of that observation across different reporters with different access points and different perspectives makes it very difficult to dismiss as bias or exaggeration. When one reporter says something, you can question the framing. When multiple reporters who do not coordinate their coverage independently arrive at the same conclusion, that carries a different kind of weight. The same national report also described Watson as the more careful, more protective quarterback with the football recently in camp. And I think the word choice there matters. Careful and protective can be framed positively as ball security and smart decision-making, but it can also be framed as hesitancy and risk aversion.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
And in the context of a quarterback who tore his Achilles tendon in 2024 and has not taken a live hit in a real football game since then, the question of whether that carefulness is a conscious strategic choice or an unconscious physical hesitancy becomes one of the most important evaluation questions this coaching staff has to answer. Because this upcoming preseason stretch is Watson's first live action since that injury. The first time real defenders are going to hit him. The first time a pass rush is going to collapse around him, and he has to decide in a fraction of a second whether to step up, scramble, or take the sack. That is not something you can simulate in practice, no matter how competitive the sessions are. Practice does not replicate the psychological pressure of knowing a 260-pound defensive end is coming to put you on the ground for real. And for a quarterback coming off a torn Achilles, the subconscious trust in that repaired tendon, the willingness to plant and drive without a microsecond of hesitation, that is something that only reveals itself under real game conditions. Watson might be completely fine. He might step into that pocket against Chicago and look like the quarterback Houston gave up 3 first-round picks for. That is a real possibility. But it is also a real possibility that the first time he feels pressure, his body makes a decision his mind did not authorize. A half-step hesitation, a throw released a fraction of a second early, a willingness to check down that was not there before the injury. Those are the things this preseason is going to reveal. For Sanders, the open question is different but equally important. His pre-snap and post-snap processing speed has reportedly improved throughout camp, but the question is whether that improvement has a ceiling or whether it is still climbing. Reading a defense in practice against your own scheme is one thing. Reading a defense in a game where the opponent has specifically game planned to disguise coverages and confuse you is a completely different challenge. Both quarterbacks have real, specific, legitimate questions that only live football can answer. And I actually think that is the most useful and honest framing anybody offered all week. But there is another layer to this competition that has been hiding in plain sight all camp, and it has nothing to do with arm strength or processing speed. It has to do with the schedule itself, and a theory about why the preseason games were arranged the way they were. What I'm about to walk you through might change how you view this entire competition. There is a theory floating around Cleveland media right now that I think deserves serious consideration, even though I am not fully sold on it myself. The theory is this: the Browns specifically want Watson to make his first start in almost 2 years on the road in Chicago rather than at home in Cleveland, because they are trying to avoid a situation where Watson runs onto that home field for the first time since his Achilles injury and gets a mixed reaction from the crowd. Think about what that home environment could look like if Watson started first at home. You would have a portion of the fan base genuinely supportive of Watson and hopeful for his return. You would have another portion that has been vocally ready to move on for months and views Sanders as the future. You would potentially have a third group that is just frustrated with the entire situation and might react unpredictably. That is a volatile atmosphere for any quarterback, but especially for one making his first appearance in a real game after a major injury. A road start in Chicago removes all of that complexity. The crowd is hostile either way regardless of who is playing quarterback. There is no split reaction to manage. Watson can just focus on football without the added psychological weight of reading his own fan base's temperature in real time. I think that is a plausible and reasonable theory. It shows a level of awareness about the optics and psychology of this situation that I would actually give the organization credit for if it turned out to be true. But I also think there is an equally simple competing explanation sitting right next to it that does not require any strategic thinking at all. Watson started camp with the ones from day one. He has been the first quarterback in every rotation throughout the entire offseason. Continuing that same established order into the preseason schedule is the most natural, default, path of least resistance decision this staff could make. It does not require a meeting. It does not require a strategic discussion about crowd reactions. It is just continuing what they have all.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Already been doing. Both explanations are reasonable. Both are plausible. Neither one is confirmed. And I would rather sit honestly with that uncertainty than pretend I know which one is true, because right now this is genuinely just pattern recognition dressed up as insider knowledge regardless of which theory you prefer. The reporters presenting either theory as though it reveals something definitive about the coaching staff's thinking are doing the same thing Mary Kay did with her slight edge language. They are making a claim that sounds confident, but is not actually falsifiable because they have left themselves enough room to pivot if it turns out to be wrong. But here is what I think actually matters most about this scheduling situation, and it is something that barely got any attention at all this week. Because buried underneath the debate about which start matters more is an advantage for Sanders that almost nobody bothered to point out clearly. And once you see it, the whole Watson starts first narrative looks very different. Everybody spent this entire week focused on the fact that Watson is starting the Chicago preseason game first, and almost nobody stopped to think about what the full picture actually looks like when you account for everything Sanders is getting in return. Because Sanders is not just starting the second preseason game against Buffalo. He is also getting the bulk of the reps in the Thursday joint practice against Buffalo's actual starting defense leading into that game. And if you are watching Gridiron Ground, you know we do not just look at the surface-level headline. We look at the total package. So let me lay this out clearly. Watson gets the Chicago preseason start. That is one evaluation opportunity in a preseason game environment against a team they have not practiced with and have no joint session familiarity with. That is valuable, but it is a single data point. Sanders gets the Buffalo joint practice, reps against a starting defense that is game planning and competing at a level well above a typical preseason intensity. And then he gets the Buffalo preseason game start on top of that. That is two substantial evaluation opportunities stacked on top of each other. A full joint practice session with competitive high-level reps followed by a preseason start against the same team. That is a significantly larger and arguably more valuable evaluation sample than what Watson is getting with just the Chicago start alone. Now think about what would have happened if the roles had been reversed. If Watson had gotten both the joint practice reps with Buffalo and the Buffalo preseason start, while Sanders only got the Chicago game, that would have been a meaningfully weaker overall opportunity for Sanders. He would have gotten one preseason game against a random opponent with no joint practice context. Watson would have gotten the joint practice plus the game against the same team. That imbalance would have been a legitimate concern. But as it stands right now, it is Sanders who ended up with the bigger complete evaluation sample. And that detail has been almost completely buried under the Watson starts first narrative. I'm not saying this was intentional by the coaching staff. It might just be how the schedule fell based on the order they already established in camp. But intentional or not, the result is that Sanders has a real meaningful opportunity here that goes beyond just a preseason game. Joint practices are where coaches actually learn things about quarterbacks. The intensity is closer to regular season football. The defense across the field is genuinely trying to win. The reps have weight to them in a way that early preseason game reps against vanilla defensive schemes often do not. This is a substantial chance for Sanders to demonstrate exactly the two things Andrew Berry said this decision comes down to: playmaking ability against a real competitive defense, and operation inside the huddle under conditions that actually test whether his processing speed improvements hold up against scheme complexity he has not seen before. If Sanders shows up in that joint practice and performs at a level that clearly...
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
...exceeds what Watson showed in Chicago. This competition changes regardless of who started first. But do not just take my word for how this is trending, because there is a beat writer who covers this team every single day and has no obvious rooting interest in either direction. And his prediction about how this season is going to play out might be the most honest thing anybody said all week. And what he said did not get nearly the attention it deserved. A beat writer who covers the Browns regularly, and from what I can tell does not lean reflexively pro-Sanders or anti-Watson, made a prediction this week that I think cuts through all the noise better than anything else we have discussed. His prediction was straightforward. Sanders is going to end up starting a significant number of games this season. And the reason is simple. Watson has not looked good enough through this stretch of camp to hold the job. He was careful to clarify that he does not see a scenario where Cleveland moves on from Sanders entirely, which, to be fair, was never really a serious question to begin with. The team drafted him. They are invested in him. He is part of their future regardless of what happens in the short term. But him saying plainly and publicly that Sanders looks better than Watson right now, without caveats or hedge language or slight edge phrasing, coming from someone without an obvious agenda in either direction, that carries genuine weight. It is the kind of direct assessment that has been almost entirely absent from the local coverage, because most reporters have been too busy protecting their access or their future predictions to just say clearly what they are seeing. Now I want to be careful and honest here too. Looking better in practice does not automatically guarantee winning the starting job. This decision ultimately sits with the coaching staff, and there could be factors at play in how they weigh things that go beyond pure on-field performance through camp. There is a broader psychological thread worth pulling on, and I want to flag clearly that this part is my own speculation, not confirmed reporting from inside the building. Given Monken's documented history of taking a long time to make difficult decisions, and given some of the slower-moving patterns we have seen from this front office in other areas, it is fair to wonder whether there is a deeper hesitancy at play beyond just being methodical and thorough. And that hesitancy could cut in either direction. It is just as plausible that the coaching staff's caution eventually favors Sanders if they are genuinely worried about Watson's turnover history and post-injury limitations. It is equally plausible that the same caution favors Watson if they are nervous about handing a franchise to a rookie who has only been in the system for a few months. I am genuinely not certain which way that psychological factor cuts, and I do not think anybody outside that building actually knows either. Now, one more thing before we close because it is important. Tony Grossi put out content this week suggesting Sanders' arm is not actually stronger than Watson's. That directly contradicts what multiple other reporters, including the national source we discussed earlier, have been saying based on the same practices. And this is where we arrive at what I think is actually the biggest story coming out of Cleveland this week. It is not which quarterback is better. We are going to find that out for real starting Saturday when actual football gets played. The real story is how genuinely impossible it has become to get a consistent, reliable read on this competition from the local media coverage. Reporters who are supposedly working with the same access, watching the same practice reps, standing on the same sideline, keep landing on completely opposite conclusions about basic observable facts. One says Sanders has the clearly stronger arm. Another says that is not true at all. One says Watson has a slight edge. Another says Sanders has looked better all camp. One says this is really a backup competition. Several others describe it as the most evenly split genuine starting quarterback battle they have seen in years. Those things cannot all be true simultaneously. And that right there is the actual takeaway from everything we covered today. The Cleveland Browns media environment has become so contradictory, so fragmented, and so driven by individual narratives that it has become almost useless as a tool for understanding what is actually happening on that practice field. You have reporters with the same credentials, the same access, standing in the same spot, watching the same throws, and coming away with completely different stories about the same competition. That is not normal. That tells you either the competition is so genuinely close that reasonable observers are seeing different things depending on which reps they happen to focus on, or it tells you that some of these reporters are filtering what they see through predetermined conclusions they arrived at before training camp even started. Either way, the good news is that none of it matters for much longer. Saturday is coming. Real football is coming. Live reps against a defense that did not spend the offseason practicing against these same plays. And once that happens, the rep counts stop mattering. The hedge language stops mattering. The scheduling theories stop mattering. We are going to see Watson take real hits for the first time since his Achilles injury. We are going to see Sanders operate against a defense that is genuinely trying to stop him. And whatever happens on that field is going to tell us more in one quarter of football than this entire training camp media circus has told us in weeks. This is Gridiron Ground. We do not do slight edges. We do not do hedge language. We watch the tape, we say what we see, and we let the football tell the story. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Who starts week 1, Watson or Sanders? And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, because this is going to be the most entertaining quarterback competition in the NFL this season. And we are going to be here for every single snap of it.